Good morning, I'm Robert Tan. From markets to policy, from Manila to the world, we cut through the noise so you can navigate, adapt, and lead. This is Business 360. A mixed fuel price adjustment is taking effect this week, with diesel likely to drop by up to 10 pesos and gasoline to increase just a little. Global oil prices jumped sharply as peace talks between the United States and Iran stall. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will no longer send delegations to Pakistan. Deutsche Bank sees the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas hiking rates by another 50 basis points this year due to a worsening inflation outlook. Joining us is Dr. Peter Liu, Dean of the University of Asia and the Pacific School of Economics. Plus, the husband of Vice President Sara Duterte is set to file a criminal complaint against the Anti-Money Laundering Council, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and several lawmakers over what he says was the unauthorized disclosure of confidential banking records. This week, fuel prices are moving in different directions after two consecutive big-time rollbacks. Prices of diesel are expected to drop by 8 to 10 pesos, while those of gasoline could increase by up to 1.5 pesos. That's based on 4-day trading data from the Mean of Platts Singapore, the benchmark pricing reference used by local oil companies. Currently, diesel is priced at an average of 105 pesos per liter and gasoline at 85 pesos. Global oil prices jump again by as much as 2% as peace talks between the United States and Iran stall. As of past 8 a.m. Manila time, the benchmark Brent crude soared to more than $107 per barrel. This comes after U.S. President Donald Trump told Fox News he will no longer send delegations to attend peace talks with Iran. He says they should contact Washington directly and insists Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, otherwise, quote, there is no reason to meet. In a statement early Sunday, Iran's president said pressure and hostile actions from the U.S. are making progress towards renewed talks more difficult. Businesses in the country were more pessimistic in March as the Middle East conflict weighs on sentiment. The BSP's Business Expectations Survey shows business confidence fell to over negative 24% in March, a sharp fall from the positive 8.2% in February. Hiring plans could also take a hit, with the employment outlook dropping from over 27% to negative 0.1%. Businesses now expect consumer spending to slow down as higher fuel costs push up the prices of basic goods and services. But while businesses turned more cautious in March, households were a bit less pessimistic at the start of the year. The BSP's Consumer Expectations Survey shows the confidence index improved by 6.4 percentage points to negative 15.8% in the first quarter. The survey was conducted from January 22 to February 5, before the onset of the Middle East crisis. The BSP says households expected higher earnings, stable jobs, and additional sources of income. But the outlook was less upbeat for the months ahead, with consumers still worried about high prices, corruption, and government policies. Frankfurt-based Deutsche Bank research sees 2 more rate hikes this year, bringing the country's key policy rate at 5%. In a report by Business World, Deutsche said the BSP is likely to increase rates by 25 basis points each in June and August, for a total of 50 basis points. Deutsche expects the central bank to act sooner rather than later in keeping inflation from staying above target. And to help us make sense of these developments is Dr. Peter Liu, Dean of the University of Asia and the Pacific School of Economics. Good morning, Dr. Lee. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is Peter Liu. Yeah, so I'm glad to thank you for the invitation.
Professor, if analysts are right that the BSP may still hike another 50 basis points this year, now what would be the strongest justification for going that far?
Well, I do a quick look at some of the other countries, because our inflation rate actually jumped highest relative to some of the other ASEAN countries.
Yes.
I think we went from 2.4
To 4.1.
4%. So that's it's almost double. Kaya I can appreciate the BSP's taking a preemptive stance, as I think they said, of raising interest rates.
But Professor, at what point does the BSP risk over tightening, especially if businesses are already pulling back because of fuel costs and weaker demand?
Well, it's hard to put a exact interest rate at which point we should stop. No? A lot depends on how the inflation proceeds. I was looking at some of the previous episodes of oil price shocks. For example, in 2008, the prices would still continue to go up about 1 to 2 months after the oil prices peak. So the 4.1% inflation we've seen so far probably isn't big yet. So it's probably going to go up a little bit more. So I can see the previous forecast you were saying that about 0.5 basis points for this year. So that sounds within my ballpark then.
Professor, the current rate hike, it was told that it wasn't unanimous. There are also two schools of thought saying the BSP should not have increased, it should have paused. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that reflects kasi the fear of we are already in a slowdown because of the flood control problems. I mean, there was a budget last year,
Yes.
which slowed down our fiscal spending. So you saw our GDP already come down to I think 4%. So I think that's the reason why there is not unanimity, because of the fear now we might go overboard and make the economy actually slow down even further. Although I can see the increase in inflation rate is a little bit, I won't say alarming, but it's like from 2.4 now, I said it's almost double.
Yes.
So I can see some need to take to do some preliminary steps. But the balancing act is how not to overdo it. So we'll have to. Well, it's now April. I think the first quarter GDP numbers are going to come out pretty soon.
Yes.
Combined with more updated inflation rates, then we can probably moderate a bit better. If the first quarter GDP numbers aren't too bad, maybe 4 and above, then perhaps it might actually give a bit more space to further increase. But if the first quarter GDP rates are going to be not very good, no, I mean, maybe let's say about below 4, then I suspect the BSP might have to take a pause and see whether how much they want to push the interest rate hikes more. No? As I said, because the problem here is external. I mean, what drove this inflation is something beyond our control. But unfortunately for the BSP, the only tool they have is interest rates, which does not really get at the root cause. But their mandate is to control inflation, and that's the main tool that they have.
Yeah. Having said that, Professor, we see BSP is trying to anchor expectations. But for the benefit of our viewers, how much can higher interest rates affect the economy when pressure is coming from oil, fertilizer, and imported costs?
Well, those things will further increase costs. But I was thinking that it might not have that deleterious an effect. I mean, if we raise interest rates, because we're coming anyway from a relatively slower economy, no? Yes. So the further, because higher interest rates are supposed to dampen consumer spending, more importantly, dampen the borrowings by investors of plans on expansion. But since we're coming from a relatively weaker GDP growth already, those plans are probably not in there. I think interestingly, you just before this, you showed some clips about consumer expectations, and also I don't know if there was something about loan growth, but it's not that strong. So hiking the interest rates might not actually hurt too much, because what it's supposed to do kasi is to reduce spending in consumers and businesses. But if that spending was not that strong to begin with, the hurt may not be as much. I mean, the dampening effect may not be as great as would otherwise be the case if the economy was growing strongly.
For the average Filipino, it could sound confusing, but Professor, how can we make sense of all this? And what would be a better way? What action should actually take place instead of what we're currently seeing?
Well, the problem is what sparked this is what we call a cost. It's a cost push inflation. So what happened was a raw material, in this case oil,
on the supply side,
became very expensive. So costs went up, and that generally will dampen economic activity. Firstly, in the Philippines, because we're a very consumer spending-driven economy, inflation will hurt the consumers. So they're not going to be as optimistic about spending. So that's going to slow down the consumer spending. As I said, the root cause actually is a supply side problem. The lack of oil or the higher cost of it. Unfortunately, the way to address that is more long-term. Although there are things in place already. I mean, we can see in the Philippines we're transitioning away from oil. And I might say that this perhaps might be the last oil crisis we're going to see, because we're already seeing a shifting of demand away from oil. And the last frontier actually was transportation. We could not, in past oil prices, oil price shocks, we could not substitute away from oil because there was no alternative. Now there is electric vehicles, and you could see that the uptake in electric vehicles was already rising even before the Iran oil war. What that did was it accelerated, so that going down the road, we will see less and less, I think, for the Philippines, dependence on. It won't happen overnight, of course, but we're already seeing a shifting towards that. The government has some programs, I believe, to roll out also as well public utility vehicles that are battery or electric based. No? So down the line, in the future, oil price shocks like this won't probably impact us as much anymore. But so what we have to do is structurally change our economy so that we will be less dependent on oil. And it's already there. I mean, the market naturally does it. When something goes up in price, like for gasoline from 60 to 100, or diesel from about 60 also to about over 100, that naturally makes people shift to other things. That way, there's a lot of talk about moving on to electric modes of transportation. And it's now possible. Plus, the other technological advance in our time is the ability now to work from home. So you are also substituting away from oil in that case, because then you don't commute to work anymore, but you just do your work at home. You demand less oil products, gasoline.
But when we look at that, we see that in the long term. What can we do in the short and mid-term to help the Filipinos mitigate, and a lot of the workers and even the transport sector are really getting hit right now?
Well, I think that the government is taking good steps, which is to provide some assistance to the transport sector, because they're the first to get hit. So the transport drivers, the operators, they are already giving some subsidies. Maybe it's just refining that process so that there's less leakage, and perhaps maybe moving towards a subsidy that's perhaps based more on let's say, the kilometers actually traveled, meaning like at the pump price, it reflects as a discount given only to jeepneys or buses. That kasi would, I think, be a bit better, because to give a flat subsidy, just a flat amount, there's some risk also that recipients might not necessarily. They might just take it and not actually spend it on producing transportation services.
Now,
When they
Professor,
might use it for food instead.
yeah. Professor,
Which is, one cannot blame them, because that's where they're hit also.
right now, Professor, as the people, the business sector, wait for the next steps, the next actions of the BSP, what indicators should we watch right now to know whether inflation expectations are becoming unanchored?
Well, as I mentioned, we'll have to keep monitoring the CPI. So we went up by 4.1%, I think, for March. So we look at what's it going to look like after April ends. Then we also look at, very interested to see what the first quarter GDP figures will look like. No, so if it's relatively weak, then I have a feeling that the BSP might have to slow down on their interest rate hikes for the rest of the year, because I don't think they'll want to push us over the tip into a stagflation talaga. No? I mean, high prices at the same time, the economy taking.
But Professor, if borrowing costs stay elevated and if we do see another rate hike in the next coming months, which analysts are seeing to up to 50 basis points, which parts of the economy or sectors will feel the pressure first?
Well, when we look at the CPI, the different categories, what goes up quickest, of course, is the transport sector. So the CPI, the inflation for transport goes up fastest, and then followed by food and beverages. So then after that, well, I think the category for housing, other fuels, utilities expenses, then they follow as well. So those sectors generally tend to get hit hardest. Transport for obvious reasons. So land, air, sea transportation, they get hit first because obviously they use the oil for now. Until, as I mentioned, the future, we will be less oil reliant, even for, well, certainly for land transport. We're already seeing that transition right now.
And if we look at the business community, the business confidence right now is at its weakest in more than 25 years. Now, could this lead companies to delays in hiring, expansion, and investment, and especially now borrowing costs are higher?
Yes, it will, of course. We would expect that firms will put their expansion plans on hold. They probably had a bit of that wariness even before the Iran war because of the uncertainty over the fiscal problems that we're having with the flood control and the management of the budget. So our economy had already slowed down. So I suspect that some of the hiring plans and expansion plans were already put on hold. And that's why I was saying earlier, if we hike interest rates, perhaps it might not really hurt as much anyway, because we were probably on a sort of a slowing down mode already. So the further slowing down may not be as painful. I mean, as a result of the interest rates hiking.
Now, the government is asking agencies to cut spending and defer selected projects. What does this mean for the economy?
Well, slower fiscal growth will always mean a slower economic growth. But even if we wanted to prime the economy, as we say, we, of course, have to be very selective at what we spend on there. I would say that we could slow down on other things, but I think we just really simply need to move on, keep on going with our infrastructure spending, because competitiveness of the country is weak because we suffer from poor infrastructure for the longest time. I mean, we do need to find ways to plug the process of how the budget is allocated for infrastructure programs. No? But that, I think, needs to go ahead. And perhaps in the meantime, perhaps some social services like the subsidies we'd have to maintain as long as the prices remain high. So probably first priority still continue with that, the infrastructure spending, and then the social assistance.
But where can we strike the balance there, Professor?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, where can we strike the balance in terms of maybe doing too much, not doing anything, pausing or lessening any policies or fiscal targets?
Well, I think we'd have to go back to parang it's like I suppose a patient, not that I'm a medical doctor, but I mean you'd want to keep monitoring the blood pressure, right?
Yes. Right
To
now,
make sure
medyo
the
mataas.
person is doing. So for me, the blood pressure of the economy would remain still the GDP growth rates. Are we keeping our GDP up naman at least so that we're not slowing down too much? The other one would be the inflation rates because those have an impact on consumer spending, which is a big part of our economy. So I keep my tabs on those. Inflation rate, I think, will still go up a bit. And then the GDP, let's look at the first quarter results that are, I think, coming out in a few weeks. So. And then hopefully it's better than 4. Perhaps sometime, hopefully maybe it's even better, 4.5 or better. Then that would mean that we're still going to be able to weather this with additional interest rate hikes likely down the line.
But like you've mentioned, if inflation remains above target through the next year, what happens to the Philippines' growth story and our competitiveness within the region?
You got choppy a little bit there, but I think your question is what happens to the Philippines' competitiveness and growth story, I think, no?
Yes.
So if the high inflation continues, well, because of the macro policy in place right now, which is a higher interest rate, and expected to rise a bit more as inflation will start to rise pa rin because there is a lag effect of the inflation. So I'm expecting, of course, that we would many institutions have already revised their growth rates for the Philippines downward. So we likely also see the same thing, that we will be having to reduce our GDP growth rates for projections for the country. And competitiveness depends on if we can continue. We need to fix that flood control budget process so that we can confidently release those funds again and address our infrastructure deficiencies.
And finally, Professor, if I were your student and I had a daily allowance of 200 pesos, how would the 4.1% inflation affect what I can buy today? And what would be your quick, solid advice moving forward?
Well, everybody will have to tighten their belts. I mean, siguro, for example, wag na lang mag-soft drinks, mag-tubig na lang. Actually, the 4.1% is the overall inflation rate. If you look at food and beverage, I forget, I think it's a bit higher.
Yeah, it's much higher.
It's about maybe, I forget now, but it is higher than the 4.1%, the one for food and beverage. So, I like all consumers, we'll just have to resort to other things that are cheaper, make do with a little bit less, and to shy away from those things that are a bit more expensive and not naman necessary. So just the essentials probably is what they should eat.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much, Professor, for joining us this morning. Thanks for sharing your insights and your valuable advice.
Thank you for having me.
More stories when we return. Business 360 will be right back.
The Philippines is moving fast, and so are we. Bilyonaryo News Channel is now live on GSAT Channel 40, reaching a broader audience across Visayas and Mindanao, with brave stories and bold insights that shape business, economy, and the country. From Metro Manila and beyond, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Manood, makinig, at manalo sa OMG! Oh My Gas tulong Abante. Tumutok lang sa mga programa ng Abante araw-araw at baka ikaw na ang maswerteng kaabante na makaakuha ng 500 pesos panggas. Hintayin ang queue ng Anchor para makapag-register. I-text ang OMG space ang inyong pangalan at isend ito sa 0917-192-8511. Bago matapos ng show, bubunot ang Anchor ng isang maswerteng mananalo. Tatawagan ka namin on air at kailangan masagot mo ito on the spot. May itatanong ang Anchor at kapag nasagot mo ito ng tama, iyon na ang 500 pesos! Oh my gosh! Tulong Abante! Ang promo na ito ay bukas sa lahat ng mga drivers. Isang pag-alalay mula sa Abante. Kasama mo!
Vice President Sara Duterte's husband is moving to sue top financial and lawmaking officials over alleged unauthorized disclosure of bank records. Lawyer Mans Carpio says he will file a criminal complaint today before the Quezon City Prosecutor's Office against officials from the Anti-Money Laundering Council, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and members of the House Justice Committee. He accuses them of violating the Anti-Money Laundering Act, Bank Secrecy Law, and Data Privacy Act by disclosing confidential financial information linked to him and his wife Sara Duterte. The move comes amid ongoing impeachment proceedings where AMLAC reported billions of pesos in flagged transactions tied to their accounts. Ombudsman Jesus Crispin Remulla says around 5 to 6 cases may be filed against former House Speaker Martin Romualdez in connection with the flood control probe. In the DZRH news program Executive Session, Remulla notes that the cases are being prepared and may be filed one after another within the next 2 weeks. He adds that the complaints against the president's cousin are now under preliminary investigation.
All the cases will involve the same action by the AMLC. Kaya itong sa court, i-manifest lang namin sa court, meron ba kami ibang kaso. Ang kalaban namin dito, akusado sa pagnanakaw sa gobyerno. Ito, tiga-gobyerno to. Ito, maraming pera, may kapangyarihan. Hindi ho madali labanan to.
The remarks come after Remulla confirmed a Court of Appeals freeze order on assets linked to Romualdez in the flood control anomaly probe. Government agencies are being asked to cut select operating expenses by at least 20% amid the energy crisis brought by the Iran war. The Department of Budget and Management issued the directive covering national government departments, state universities and colleges, and government-owned and controlled corporations. The cuts will cover expenses such as official travel, training and seminars, scholarships, office supplies, utilities, and representation expenses. Savings will be redirected to uplift the government's emergency relief program for sectors hit by rising fuel and energy costs. Amid the flood control controversy, the Department of Public Works and Highways is under pressure to clean house while keeping major infrastructure projects moving. G. Baroga tells us more.
Public Works Chief Vince Dizon continues his work amid the ongoing flood control scandal. He says President Bongbong Marcos has issued 3 directives: hold those accountable, return the people's money, and reform the DPWH. On the sidelines of the 5th General Membership Meeting of JCI Manila, the Secretary said he visits various projects across the country to ensure they are being done properly. This includes roads and bridges, which he said are especially important now amid the oil crisis.
Kailangan magbago lang yung mindset sa department na ang priority na talaga is to do things well, high quality, at mabilis, at syempre, walang kalokohan.
The agency says completing unfinished projects is a priority. According to Secretary Dizon, many projects in the country have been left idle for 5 to 10 years.
A lot of the bridges, I think we will be able to finish. A lot of the new toll roads, especially TR4, going all the way to Lucena, roads in the Visayas and Mindanao, like the Subic Express, the Cebu Metro Expressway, the Davao City Bypass. These things I think can be done before the end of PBBM's term.
However, he admits this cannot be done without the private sector. Organizations like JCI Manila are important, he adds, to keep government workers on their toes. G. Baroga, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Overseas, an apparent assassination attempt against President Donald Trump sent the White House into crisis mode. A Filipino journalist witnessed the chaos and shares what she saw in this report by U.S. correspondent Henny Espinosa.
Another close call for President Donald Trump. On Saturday night, during the White House Correspondents' Dinner at a Washington, D.C. Hilton, President Trump was preparing to speak when several gunshots rang out outside the venue. Vice President J.D. Vance, First Lady Melania Trump, and cabinet members were also in attendance. Secret Service agents quickly rushed the president and other top officials to safety. Inside, many of the 2,600 guests took cover. Journalists who were at the event recounted the moment they first heard the gunshots, among them Filipina Janelle Dumalaon. Dumalaon, an Ateneo de Manila University graduate and a correspondent for Deutsche Welle, said she sheltered in a bathroom after hearing the shots.
I was in the bathroom when I heard 6 or 7 shots ring. I'm not sure exactly. And what was going through my head was that I thought those were gunshots, but I could not be certain. And when a woman from the security services, either from the hotel or law enforcement, not sure exactly, she confirmed that those were gunshots and that we should shelter in place.
Authorities say the armed suspect fired at a Secret Service agent who was wearing a bulletproof vest and is recovering. The suspect was taken into custody and reportedly had multiple weapons. On Truth Social, Trump shared a video of the suspect rushing security at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, as well as a photo of the suspect on the ground after being apprehended. Media reports identified the lone shooter as 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen of Torrance, California, a teacher who was once named Teacher of the Month in Los Angeles County.
Right now, the defendant is being charged with 2 counts, 924C, using a firearm during a crime of violence, and a second crime under 111, which is assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon.
Trump, who has faced multiple assassination threats over the years, said the venue was not sufficiently secure. He then argued the incident underscored the need to complete his proposed $400 million White House ballroom project.
And I didn't want to say this, but this is why we have to have all of the attributes of what we're planning at the White House. It's actually a larger room, and it's much more secure. It's drone-proof, it's bulletproof glass. We need the ballroom.
Phil-Am Trump supporter and Republican leader Rachel Gunther posted online blaming opponents of the project and arguing the incident proves the ballroom needs to be built. Donnie De Leon, a Phil-Am Democratic leader, said he was troubled by what he called an attempt to turn a grave security incident into a pitch for a construction project. He said, quote, "It isn't leadership, it's opportunism, and as a veteran, he finds it deeply offensive. The president said the correspondence dinner would be rescheduled within 30 days. Henny Espinosa, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
More stories when we return. Business 360 will be right back. Ayala Land is shifting strategy to boost steady income amid a volatile property market. The company is expanding its leasing portfolio and redeveloping malls, helping lift core EBIT margins to 36% and drive growth in its commercial segments. It plans to open over 200,000 square meters of new mall space this year, while upgrading existing assets, with mall revenues rising 5% and lease-out rates reaching 91% in 2025. The shift positions leasing as a key driver of earnings over the next 3 years. Megaworld is expanding its Ilocania Coast Town project with a new beach club in Lawag City. The Ilocania Beach Club will be the first in the area, featuring a main facility with beach access, restaurants, cafes, shops, fitness and relaxation amenities, and VIP lounges. The project is inspired by Sentosa Island beach clubs in Singapore and will serve as the township's flagship lifestyle hub along a 1.4-kilometer coastline. Land development of Ilocania Coast Town is set to begin early next year, with the township also planned to include commercial, residential, and leisure developments. Let's take a look at how local markets are performing as of 9:52 this morning. The PSEI is in the red, down almost 0.4%. Value turnover stands at 957 million pesos. Market breadth is negative, with 54 advancers, 66 decliners, and 60 unchanged stocks. Meanwhile, early trade shows mixed movements among active stocks, with BDO sliding nearly 2%. In the week ahead, Call Financial says investors will be monitoring corporate earnings releases. In the U.S., focus will be on the Fed's policy decision, with markets fully pricing in a hold. A heavy week of corporate earnings led by major technology companies, along with a Federal Reserve meeting, is expected to weigh on Wall Street this week. This as investors assess the sustainability of the recent stock market rally and the outlook for monetary policy. Last Friday, Wall Street ended mixed, but the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closed at record highs. This was bolstered by optimism over potential negotiations between the U.S. and Iran to end their war, and a surge in Intel shares that extended the rally in semiconductor stocks. The Dow Jones dropped almost 0.2%. The S&P 500 rose 0.8%, while the Nasdaq added almost 2%. Our Republican senator says he is ready to advance the nomination of Federal Reserve Chair nominee Kevin Warsh. Senator Tom Tillis made the statement after the Justice Department dropped its investigation into incumbent Fed Chair Jerome Powell. The move marks a reversal for Tillis, who had vowed to block any Fed nominee until the Powell investigation was resolved. Tillis had said the probe raised concerns over the Federal Reserve's political independence. But in an interview on NBC's Meet the Press, Tillis said Warsh would make a great Fed chair. The push to turn Luzon into a major investment corridor is moving forward. Finance Secretary Frederick Go met with U.S. Ambassador Heather Varieva in Washington to discuss next steps for the Luzon Economic Corridor. The project is a trilateral initiative among the Philippines, the United States, and Japan, aimed at linking key economic hubs in Luzon and attracting high-quality investments. Talks focus on the next LEC Steering Committee meeting in Manila this May and the first Investors Forum later this year. The corridor covers priority areas including Subic, Clark, Manila, and Batangas, with projects spanning rail, port modernization, clean energy, semiconductor supply chains, and agribusiness. The proposed Philippine-European Union Free Trade Agreement is gaining urgency as global tensions disrupt supply chains and fuel prices. EU ambassador to the Philippines, Massimo Santoro, said recent shocks from the Middle East conflict to U.S. tariff moves show why countries need reliable and predictable trade partners. The sixth round of FTA talks is set for May 18 to 22 in Manila, with both sides aiming to conclude negotiations within the year. If signed, the deal is expected to replace the EU's GSP Plus scheme, which is set to expire in 2027. The EU is the Philippines' fourth largest trading partner, with trade in goods reaching nearly 640 billion pesos in the first half of 2025. More stories when we return. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump is making large-scale bond investments across multiple sectors. Financial disclosures show he carried out 175 transactions in March, including at least $51 million in bond purchases, mostly in municipal and U.S. Treasury assets. His largest deals range from $1 million to $5 million each and included corporate bonds from major companies across energy, technology, and finance. The disclosures put the combined maximum value of his bond purchases at about $161 million. The cars Americans can't buy are drawing foreign visitors to China. An American YouTuber is giving foreign visitors a closer look at China's fast-rising electric vehicle industry. Ethan Robertson led an international tour at the Beijing Auto Show, showcasing low-priced, tech-heavy vehicles that many say offer more features than similar models in the United States.
We have a very diverse and international audience, but our largest portion of our audience online is Americans. And I would say that Americans' response in general to Chinese cars is, why can't I buy this? Our comment section is full of people saying things like, I can't believe the government won't allow them to sell this car in my country. It's so cheap, it's so high-tech, it seems so nice.
On the other hand, observers may say Chinese EVs may eventually enter the U.S. market despite current political barriers.
No, it's all political. But that'll change because Canada has just released and able to have Chinese cars in, and they're big in Australia, big in New Zealand. So I think it'll only be 3 or 4 years before the Americans get it too, I suppose.
Before we go, the much-awaited sequel of The Devil Wears Prada premieres this week in cinemas. The movie is coming to the big screen this Wednesday, April 29. In the sequel, Miranda Priestley and Andy Sachs meet again nearly 20 years later to face a fashion industry reshaped by digital media and a changing publishing world. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Robert Tan. Thank you for joining us. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.